Welcome to CogX Day 2, Open Web Forum, brought to us by Fabric Ventures. Very pleased to be discussing this panel here, moderating this panel with three highly creative people in the art space and really thinking about how we can turn, or how digital art is turned into digital assets in the real world. So please, panel, please introduce yourself. I guess we'll start with Pauline.
Yes.
I'm very glad to have three women on the panel here today too. Yes, so you'll need headphones. Flashing red just on your left.
You need to put
Everyone else have headphones?
Put it on.
Good.
Yeah. Good morning.
Pauline, yes, please.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction, Matthew. I'm Pauline Foessel. I'm the CEO and founder of Artpool. We are an NFT curator-driven platform. What we have done for the past 4 years is that we have created a social network for art curators, so professional art curators working, in museum, galleries, non-profit spaces. And like a bit more than a year ago, we started to propose them an NFT tool where they could create collections with the artists they are working with. So we are in the NFT space, yes. Like I started really digging into it because on my side, I really had all my career in the art world. Worked for a gallery in Shanghai, for an institution in Hong Kong, as well as for an artist in Portugal. And together we created actually a gallery, public art program and edition. So art world and came into the digital space, yes, around 4 years ago.
Awesome.
So that's for me.
Thank you. And I wondered, did you see more in Asia in this as well whilst you were there? Anything developing in NFTs in Asia whilst you were there?
I wasn't, basically I came back to Portugal like 4 years ago to launch Artpool, so I wasn't in Asia like when it was the kind of the NFT craziness. So like, and I haven't been back because of the situation at the moment, so I'm still a lot in touch, but unfortunately not like physically back there. And but I know it's thriving in China.
Well, yeah. Incredible.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And Danny.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm Danny, and I'm the founder and CEO of DRAUP, which is a digital fashion marketplace. And I got into digital fashion relatively accidentally. So my background was in wider innovation, and I decided to apply everything that I was seeing in the innovation sphere and particularly look at digital fashion. And this was in late 2020. So the CMO of Gucci had just announced that they were going to start producing clothes to be worn solely digitally. And it made so much sense to me as a shift in an industry that, first of all, really demands sustainability, but yet has such a chasm in achieving it. And secondly, with the advent of the creator economy that we've been seeing. And so started a blog called This Outfits Don't Exist to really showcase to everybody from the average consumer to the C-suite of these luxury brands that this was an inevitable and incredibly impactful change. And I'm now building a marketplace which specifically deals with how fashion can reach its full potential in digitally native form. So that includes everything from financialization to optimized display to also finding the creators who really understand what digitally native fashion means in the way that we've seen in digital arts. So how are they experimenting with the mediums? How are they integrating it into their work in a way that surpasses just digitizing an item of clothing?
So kind of Web3 native fashion is where you're at.
Exactly.
Fascinating, thank you. Pauline.
Virginie, good morning, everyone.
Virginie.
That's fine. I've been working the last 8 years in the digital strategy in Europe and the Middle East, working mainly for fintechs. Then I moved to a startup called Skago, delivering drone solutions, and I accidentally joined the Web3 journey, and I'm the proud co-founder and CEO of Closet. It's a Web3 native platform dedicated to premium and luxury brands that you can access with your virtual identity through your closets, where you can dress your avatar, receive styling advices, showcase your wearables and trade them in order to express yourself as a user, and also for brands tomorrow to express themselves and reveal themselves and reinvent themselves through their dedicated and very immersive space. So we are quite close.
Incredible to see how quickly this has grown, really, right? There really is a whole ecosystem there that's, you know, is a business and is tangible, absolutely. Thank you, Virginie.
Thank you.
And Jill.
Thank you. Where is this microphone? Here. So, yes, I'm Joe Kennedy. I'm the co-founder of Unit London, which is a gallery which a good friend of mine and I set up in 2013. And really we were both sort of struggling artists really at the time. And we were frustrated with the art world, basically. It's an industry which is very elitist and can be very difficult to break into if you're not sort of from the inner circle or if you don't know the right people. So we felt that there wasn't really a direct link between talent and success in the industry. So we basically created a space to kind of be the antidote to that problem. And we use social media really as a big way to kind of drive the progress of the gallery and build a community online. And the ethos of the gallery really was all about giving artists an opportunity, fundamentally. You know, artists who maybe didn't have the right background or the right social circumstances or the right access to the right people. Using social media, we were able to kind of provide those artists a platform to showcase their work to a big audience. And over the last sort of 8 or 9 years, the gallery has grown into a reputable brand, I would say. And when we came across NFTs, it was actually introduced to me by a client of mine who's owns a big gaming company in Taiwan. Mm-hmm. He'd been talking to me about NFTs and the sort of possibilities for artists for 3 or 4 years, and I was constantly batting the conversation away because, you know, we're all so busy and it's such a big conversation to get your head around. And last year, I decided to pick up the phone and we had a conversation, and really like the utility for artists and the opportunity that it provides for artists to be able to get a sort of steady foothold in the marketplace, to be able to receive royalties for their work indefinitely, to create a more equitable marketplace for artists and collectors, just blew my mind. And as soon as I had that initial conversation, we were like 100% we're going into this space. Right. And last year we created Institut, which was the first art world platform for NFTs, led by a gallery team. And the idea with Institut is really to engender quality and sort of articulate what quality art looks like in the NFT space. So distinguishing a lot of the big marketplaces that are really kind of selling a lot of like derivative kind of trading card style work to art.
Absolutely. So you kind of went from Web 2 with social media straight to Web 3, but not Web 1. Which is interesting, I'd say, right?
Yes, yes.
And most galleries are coming from the Web 1 space. And yeah, by way of background, for me, I'm very much more from the financial side of DeFi, but I have done quite a lot of work with art galleries and auction houses with liquidity pools. Also, you know, I have a big interest in art and a big network there. So, you know, I kind of crossed the divide. But interesting you mentioned Taiwan as well there. And just on the kind of NFT space, which I'm quite heavily involved in, I know that transacted $50 billion last year, quite phenomenal. I mean, we're in the middle of a crypto crash now. We'll see what happens with that going forward. But I do know people have made a lot of money by trading NFTs, but they're really part of metaverses and creating metaverses. And the art is high quality, but it seems to have a different ethos to me. So we were just talking before and thinking about how you can create a bridge from art, really, or from, you know, Web 2, Web 1 art, through to Web 3. I mean, Pauline, what do you think? We've all got thoughts on this, but what do you all think? Maybe starting with Pauline about creating a bridge.
Well, that's my day-to-day activity, right. Let's say, because you know when you build a social network for curators, now we have more than 900 curators from 75 countries, right, who are actually working physically on art projects, right? They're organizing exhibition, writing publications, working with museums, public art. So the tangibility and the physicality is completely part of their work and the artists they work with. So it's day-to-day conversation with the curators and sorry, to kind of onboard them in the Web3 space, to explain them the challenges, the opportunities. And what's interesting, and it's not so much well known what's actually the role of a curator, but and because the kind of word curation has been used quite a lot, but it's actually, you know, professionals who work extremely closely with the artists, who go and visit them at the studio, who have all these discussions around concepts, who push them into their practice, who accompany them along the years, who create opportunities, putting their work and selecting their work in exhibitions. So they are really creating value for the artists, directly and indirectly. Even in terms of art markets, they have an impact on the value of an artist. And basically what's very interesting, because they know so well the work of the artist, we kind of train them to Web3, to NFTs. We explain them like the different possibilities that they can have. And basically because they work with hundreds of artists, then they can, you know, go and train the artists they work with. So on our side is having the trust with one person, training one person that goes and help like the artists with their practice and how it makes sense to come in the digital space, even if, you know, the artist is not originally creating digitally. Right. But a lot of artists are actually using, you know, iPad, using like, when they create sculptures, they actually use 3D rendering and so on.
He used to do that, right? He gave it away to his friends, I remember. Hockney.
Yeah.
He sketched a few bits. I mean, a lot of artists do.
Exactly.
Wow. But in your art pool, right?
Yeah.
So you have kind of vast numbers of artists, I would say. I mean, how do you deal with that big scale? I mean, obviously it must work for you very well, but how does it work, kind of this big vast number you have?
It's interesting what you're saying, because it's true that I think the strength of the platform that we've built is definitely the let's say the supply in terms of art that you can get, because you have this incredible reach everywhere in every type of movement. But then it's how can you how can you create like a market? And for me, just your questions just before about the tangibility is something very important. And I've been thinking a lot as well of how NFTs can be really a wonderful tool, but at the same time you need to bring a market and you need to open up the market to way more people, and still people not in Web3, they kind of need tangibility. I mean, let's talk to all our friends who are not necessarily in there, now trying to understand like actually what can I get out of it. And I think you can still bring tangibilities even if you sell NFTs, if you sell digital art. And for me, the bridge and the way I see it with Artpool is through art editions. I believe into printing, into 3D printing, and that you can touch so much more people than just right now the people in the NFT space. And I think that's important.
Right, so something actually really tangible coming out, that seems to be the way forward. And also MasterCard moved forward with Coinbase NFT, and now they have 5 more partnerships with MoonPay and USDC, I think. That seems to be really important to me. I mean, anyone here got MetaMask? Raise your hand if you have MetaMask.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of people, but you shouldn't be expected to have it, I think. You know, it's a difficult thing to navigate DeFi, so being able to do it with a card is really good. Yesterday we have the Signal co-founder. Soon you'll be able to pay with Signal just in crypto. So I think once that happens, it's much easier. Yeah. Do you find that too, Danny, or everyone really, in terms of the bridge? I think payments were important, but what else do you see, you know, particularly in fashion?
So I think you bring up a lot of brilliant points, and I think it's a very interesting thing because in the NFT space, I think one of the biggest buzzwords is the word utility. And there's a sweeping generalization, particularly in the fashion space, around utility, because it's, okay, utility means that you need to wear it. And I don't think that is universally true, actually. You have people who are there to make money off their digital assets, for example. There are people who are there to express their identity maybe through something like a digital gallery. There are obviously also a large number of people who want to wear things physically, but also who want to wear them on their PFPs, as we saw with the recent Bored Ape Gucci collaboration. Yeah. So I think, first of all, it's getting into the mindset of your target consumer. And I think, exactly as you identified, the target consumer for fashion in the physical world may be entirely different and have an entirely different set of wants and needs than the target consumer you're looking for in Web3, who is A, more comfortable with a digital identity, and secondly, derives status or clout in a completely different way. And I think something that my team and I say quite regularly is this idea that fashion is in the business of identity.
Right.
So you wear clothes to self-express, you also wear them to affiliate, you also wear them to show status. And one of the most fascinating things, as we've seen in digital art, is there are entirely new connotations to what status means. You might be an art blocks lover, and having a squiggle makes you somebody notable in the community. You may be a gamer, and there's a $40 billion market for skins, and you see in Fortnite, for example, default culture has emerged where you're a newbie to the game and you get slated for not having an advanced skin. And I think that was one of the most fascinating things
like
for
queues
me.
For Supreme. Those queues we've seen in Soho.
Exactly.
For Supreme. I guess you don't have the queues in the metaverse, but you still got to get the garment, right?
Exactly. And I think when you think of those markets, I would, to make a sweeping generalization, assume it's not the same people sitting front row at a fashion week who are chastising their fellow gamers for not wearing the right thing.
Right, right.
So you're seeing this entire evolution of what a consumer wants, and I think really figuring out and then meeting them. And I think from the traditional fashion consumer, there's interest in what's going on in these worlds, but we still have a pretty long way to go before they actually say, transition from following a cool Instagram to saying, I'm actually going to spend an ETH at whatever price,
right,
or even
right.
figure out how to buy Ethereum and purchase one of these virtual outfits.
So there's a physical barrier with the cash, but it's a cultural one as well. I mean, it seems like it's a different type of customer at the moment
100%.
in there, right? I think of Meta Kovan, the guy who bought the $70 million Beeple, has a $20,000 jacket, which he's proud of. And it means a lot to everyone who are degens who are in that particular community. But I guess moving forward, do you think they'll change? Do you see that, Virginie, as well? Do you think the consumers will evolve?
Yeah.
Well, not consumers, but, fashionistas or anybody in fashion in the metaverse. Are they looking different now? But do you think they will be much more aligned with what we see as fashion now?
100%. I think that the client that you can find in the street, going in the store to buy your pants today, will be completely different. And is already completely different in Web3. We are talking in Web3 about users, and you need to create utility for these users. They need to be able to play with their assets. But they are also collector, and we are talking there about aesthetic. So you need to deal with the right artist and the right talents to create them. And we also talk about investors.
Yes.
They will buy it because they do believe in the value and the potential monetization behind it. So from the client, you move to the user/collector/investor.
Okay.
And I think if you strongly focus on those pillars and you kind of crystallize them into a project or platform that you can easily access with a very smooth customer experience, including card payment, as you said. This is, for me, the best way to onboard either new customer or market or industries. And this is also the way to create the right community and the loyal community who do believe in the project, who will bring even more people, crypto native or not.
Right.
So for me, this is literally the right approach, and the movement from a client, a physical client, if I can say, to a customer tomorrow in Web3. It's for fashion, but I think it can be applied to any other type of initiative in Web3.
Wow.
Actually.
Okay. Absolutely. So you're kind of seeing the typical or the classic kind of P in creativity. That's what you're looking for, something collectible. With additions in art and also in fashion, you have this kind of highly creative piece, which is, this signature piece of a collection, which is valuable, right, and will hold its value. I guess, is that what you're seeing as the beginning of this transition to having a real-world asset as well in the metaverse?
Yeah, definitely. The thing is that, and talking about bridges between physical collection and digital collection, in our case, of course, when we see the level of creativity, originality, and quality you can reach by designing a clothes with pixel, Of course, you would love to have this liquid silver jacket in your real dressing, but you can't, because the constraint that you have in the real world with the gravity law or the rarity of the texture and the fabric is not the same in the digital world, which is a great thing, actually. So for me, the direct bridges between physical collection and digital collection, it's maybe not something that we want to focus on. However, what type of physical experience, exclusive content that you can access by being part of a digital community as an NFT collector with the real value behind it is, for me, the kind of indirect bridges that we really want to focus on.
The membership aspect.
Exactly.
That's another massive aspect. So, you know, clubs in New York now, if you have the right NFT, you can get in. Board Ape, Yacht Club, you know, very, very valuable NFTs. They now have a restaurant where you can go if you're a BAYC owner, then there's a token. So membership is very important as well, I think. But again, having membership through a really kind of highly graded piece of art, if you will, whether it's fashion or physical art, I think is important. I know, Danny, also you mentioned, was it the Dior crown?
D&G.
D&G crown, $1.2 million. I guess that's the kind of extreme example of that. So yeah, interesting to see that it is high quality and also based around membership and community, traditional values, and that really what translates into a kind of valuable asset. And Joe, what are you seeing, you know, in art coming from Web 2 through to Web 3? What's really working in terms of creating community and actually creating value as well that lasts?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, you know, art traditionally has always been a functionless thing. You know, it's not really supposed to give you anything necessarily.
Right.
It's supposed to sit on the wall, or you know, a sculpture can sit in your garden, and it's an expression of your identity in many ways and your status, but it doesn't do anything, you know, other than give you that status in a sort of covert way, let's say,
right?
Or in a social way. It gives you social equity.
Like the Beeple again in Decentralized, I think, $70 million painting in the middle in that gallery that Meta Kovan has. That's a status thing in a way, right? Or a community piece,
For sure, and I think now, you know, what we're seeing is this like application of, or the addition of membership or some sort of exclusive access to something or other, which an artwork can give you. So, I mean, in many ways, it's the same kind of underlying psychology that you get. You know, if you buy a Rothko and it's sitting behind your kitchen table, that says something about you, and that actually does give you access to certain other social circles or clubs that you might want to be a part of.
Yes.
But now it's just very explicit. So, like, I think, you know, with these things, like we were saying, the D&G crown, right? It gives you access to Dolce & Gabbana fashion shows, which are like coveted tickets to specific shows. So, like, the question now is like, how much is the aesthetic of a work important or valued over the access or the sort of the exclusivity that it brings? And that's kind of the key tension point which we're seeing right now. And it's very difficult to distinguish because you can't really have one without the other. Like the context is required to understand the piece as a whole.
Right.
So yeah, that's definitely something that we're seeing. And also, like, in terms of the generation shift and the sort of people that are buying these things, our initial hypothesis with Institut was that we would be able to onboard the traditional art collectors that, you know, we have relationships with into the NFT space, because probably versus our peers, we have a more digitally savvy audience. But the reality was, as soon as we launched the platform, all of our collectors were brand new. Guys from Twitter and from Discord.
That's it, you know, it's a massive, I think, because there's a lot of value creation as well. As we move towards Web3 and a new type of economy, a lot of value is being created in the metaverse. So people are attracted just for that and for the access value too, I think. Interesting, you were talking about portability as well. So sure, if I got a Rothko in my lounge, I probably know somebody from the Getty family or somebody who's in the Guggenheim, and they've been to my lounge and they know. But if I got a digital Rothko, I just rock up to wherever and present my token, right? So it's a much faster interaction. Quite incredible.
Yeah. And you know, it's a much more streamlined process as well. You don't have to pay for shipping, insurance.
No, nothing like that.
All of those things, right? So it's a very different thing. But I think the buyer base is very different right now. That, you know, we're having conversations every day with traditional collectors, and I think it's very true what you said about just removing as many barriers to entry as possible. Whether it's setting up a crypto wallet, whether it's getting your head around the idea of owning something digital, which doesn't have a tangibility for lots of collectors. They're like, well, where do I put it? Does it go on my wall? No. Does it, like, how do I use it? And I think if you're not if you don't understand the sort of the aspect of community and online community and the kind of essentially the access and the status that these assets give you, then it's very, very difficult to understand why you would spend 500K or $1 million on something
absolutely.
that doesn't have a tangibility.
Yep. I have heard one artist has people are bidding highly for this artist to have the NFT, but also a physical object, which is going to be blasted into space. Quite exciting. So, yeah, we see that as well. But how are you onboarding people as well? You know, going around, we're in the last 20 minutes now. Does anybody have any questions so far? Okay, we'll keep talking. I just wanted to make sure we weren't going to ride over question time. But how are you onboarding, really? To go through with all of us, perhaps quite quickly, what are you seeing in terms of onboarding and also the future?
So, I mean, we're really focused on trying to onboard traditional collectors. And I think that's where a big opportunity is. We're currently building a V2 of our platform, which is more focused on the Web3 community. And I think if you build for the sort of Web2 traditional audience, you're going to, I think you're going to fall short. I think it's very important to focus on the Web3 community and the best things about that community. So the gamification of things, the accessibility, the diversity, all of those things that make Web3 really great. If you focus on those things and make it so good that there's FOMO in the Web2 community, then you will straight away onboard them. If you try and focus on the sort of needs and sensibilities of the Web2 crowd, it's a huge uphill
It's too
battle.
static though, right? Web3's got all these different elements to it, so you need to build for that market. That's what I'm hearing, and that's what I'm seeing, absolutely. Great, and then Web2 will come. And in Web3, it's kind of like pushing an open door. Well, you know, we're looking at maybe a $400 ETH, so maybe things are going to change. But the past year, $50 billion in NFTs, I think it's been pushing an open door. It's not hard to do the Web3 thing, right? People come running. But what do you think, to Pauline, about this in terms of onboarding and...
I don't know. First, I don't think Web2, Web3. I'm thinking users, people.
Right.
Dot.
Okay, cool. You're human.
And I think like Web3, and I'm pretty optimistic about this, that's going to be in the life of every single person.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking like how, as a builder, we can, you know, touch as much people as we can.
Right.
And by that, I mean what you were saying, obviously the, you know, fiat payment, that it shouldn't be, you know, any more of a barrier to have a MetaMask, to open, and I know it's stuff we say over and over again, but that's really, really important. And for example, on the platform right now for the next drop, we are partnering with, it's a platform named Crossmint, so they, you have your credit card payment, but in addition, it's automatically creating you a wallet.
Right.
So for someone, and we are doing this because we did a few drops where we had actually a lot of people who just loved the artist, who opened the wallet, who did it, and who asked for printing of the piece, you know?
Right.
So that's things that prove that there is this will of people to come in, and I think we need, as, you know, to open up, and I think we shouldn't just concentrate on the community that exists. I think we need to onboard so much more people, and I believe art is a great mean to do it, because we have, you know, the artists that has been working on communicating, the galleries, the museums, they have already crowd of people that, you know, could benefit to come in, and I think like that's our job to make it like easier. So I don't want to be building for Web 2 or building for Web 3. I'm building for people to, you know, enjoy the amazing tools that, you know, Web 3 is offering. And I'm thinking, you know, NFTs is one of them, right? But I'm thinking tokens, like there is, you know, that's the future. So now let's try to, you know, create the path for them to come and enjoy what we are proposing, and yeah.
Yeah,
that's
the
my
soul of
vision
art
on
anyway,
this.
isn't it? Really, right? That's we're getting to, and it's quite nice. I mean, always in a crypto downturn, I've seen a few. There's always a build phase, and we seem to be in that now. Well, we definitely are in that. Everything yesterday was all about building. This is what you're doing here now. So there is really time to build and cross that bridge. And certainly, I think the MetaMask piece is so important. Not having to use a mirror to you know, get a QR code through to be able to sign up, I think is super important. So I think we're going to see far more of that. And yeah, and that's great that art is being open to the whole world, really, in Web 2, Web 3, without too much distinction between the two. And are you seeing that in fashion too? Virginie and Danny in fashion?
Yeah, agree. I think we were talking before about the easiness and the fact that you need to smooth this experience, and it starts with connecting your wallet. Of course, it also includes a very important point regarding the trust and the security in that world, and this is something that you cannot ignore. So this is also a great way to onboard people more easily. I kind of align with Pauline. It's beyond Web 2 or Web 3 actually. In our case with Closet, we may realistically target people from the kind of crypto native people or existing NFT wearables and fashion NFT holders, of course. But the idea is to extend it and convince people that they can play on this platform, and they can reach another stage of self-expression using our product, even if they are not familiarized with the crypto and blockchain and NFTs. So I think we are talking about the same thing here.
I'm seeing NFTs in goodie bags. My mind's wandering. So as you leave the fashion party with a Chanel bag, you get the NFT or something. Maybe something like that. What do you think, Danny?
So I think...
That's a bit far-fetched, but actually that's what I'm thinking. But what's actually going on?
So it's already happening. I was actually at a party that LVMH threw in Paris a month or so ago, and there were NFTs from the party that you got when you left. So that's 100% happening. I think in terms of the way that I see it, digital fashion is so much more nascent than digital art. You know, one of the best and worst things about digital art at the moment is that everyone and their grandma has heard of what digital art is, and everyone thinks that they are now a digital artist. And if you go on OpenSea, I think that becomes incredibly clear. Whereas digital fashion, you have the subset of people who actually engage with digital fashion. So those are gamers, but they don't conceptualize it as fashion. Fashion is conceptualized as this hyper-gated, hierarchical group, whereas skins is not conceptualized in that way by the existing community.
And Zrun now have a collection of people who you have to clothe. So you get the person, but you have to put the clothes on to bring them out into the world. That's a different thing, right? That's just dressing for utility. But fashion is dressing for everything else.
Exactly. So I think you have that subset that exists.
Right.
But then you're seeing the shift that exists now in Web3 with people who came in as the digital art collecting audience, who are now saying, okay, what other digital assets can we engage with? Similar thing with music.
Okay.
And so the way that I see it and the way that I'm building is, rather than going after trad fashion at the beginning, who is this group of people who already conceptualizes why digital assets have value to them? And are now looking to make that transition into a different asset class. So for me, that is the lowest friction onboarding.
Yes.
And then, you know, as I said, initially it's going to take a little bit of time to get those from traditional fashion to really engage. And I think a really interesting thing that we touched on earlier was this idea of the roadmap, and this idea that art used to be art for the sake of art, but now it's, okay, where's your roadmap? Okay, what other functionalities are there? And you see this dichotomy between CryptoPunks, and they said, okay, you have a CryptoPunk, that's it. Yes, obviously there's that social equity that you get with traditional art, but they're not saying, now you can access a restaurant in Manhattan, they're saying you have a CryptoPunk, that's it. Versus the Bored Ape Yacht Club model, which obviously is far more community-driven and decentralized, but it's, if I have a Bored Ape, I can go to this restaurant, I can go to this yacht party.
I talk to members clubs and they say it needs to be curated quite specifically. You can't just abort a token randomly, and it becomes very expensive to have a good community. So it's interesting, isn't it? The gates are wide open at the moment. We have this kind of free-for-all and kind of very commercially based thing, and we have also the artistic integrity which you can get with this. So you know, you can create new designs, you can create different types of art. Angel Baby in music, for example, apparently Angel Baby is very successful, but they come from a jurisdiction where they wouldn't be able to perform. Now they're performing on the metaverse freely. So there's a lot of artistic integrity, a lot of artistic expression, and meanwhile also this kind of big vogue for assets. You know, Proof.xyz went from 0.3 ETH to 30 ETH because everyone wanted to get into the Discord, so they paid it was worth 3 ETH and they paid 30 ETH for it. So we have this kind of big, wide playing field at the moment. Surely integrity will win out. But how are you doing that, I guess, as we're in the last 10 minutes? Danny, how are you doing that? And moving around us all, really. How are you kind of navigating this kind of big, wide field we have of digital and actually making sure that art wins through it?
That's a really great question. I think for me, it's really about having a specific ethos. And I think Web3 empowers people in numerous different ways, the entire principles of decentralization and this idea of access and this idea of democratization is highly important. And I think from my point of view, one of the things that I was most excited about was this idea of digitally native creators. You're operating in an industry where 20 brands capture 100% of the economic profit.
Right.
Very hard for young designers to break in.
Absolutely.
So on my platform, I'm specifically looking for Web3 native designers.
Right.
And designers who operate anywhere in the world who would traditionally not have access to the fashion industry because of the height of the barriers to entry. So it's not about bringing LVMH into the digital world. It's about finding those who are authentically digitally native,
Right.
empowering them, and also empowering the consumer to reach these new creators, but also financially benefit off it. Fashion has been a consumer good for hundreds of years, but actually, can it also be a financially viable asset?
Right, okay. Amazing. So yeah, a lot of scope for diversity and inclusion, I would say, throughout the world, with this platform. Anybody else have any kind of closing thoughts?
I think that's a great point because the art world, speaking from the art world, I think fashion is probably the same though. It's very much driven by a specific demographic, and it has been for centuries.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing now with essentially digital artists who've been making digital work for 20, 30 years, they have always been forced or shunned from the market basically into doing, derivative jobs for ad agencies or creating visuals for DJs at festivals, and it's all very goal-oriented production, right? And it's it kind of removes all the artistic integrity out of their work.
Right.
And so all the conversations that we were having when we started the platform with these digital artists was oh wow, I can be contextualized from a gallery. I can be seen as an artist now.
Right. And not a graphic designer.
Exactly, not a designer. And I think that's, that pool of creativity is so much broader than the institutionalized pool of creativity that the gallery world has traditionally selected from. So we are seeing a much more diverse and much more interesting talent pool now, which is a great thing. It's much more reflective of the world we live in, and it's a much fairer, much more inclusive, and much more equitable system really for artists.
And more global, right? We have, Asia's popping as well. We hardly get into that in Europe, but it's all there. I can see that coming forward in next year or so. Far more fusion between all the continents of the world, really, where this is really very active. Yeah. Cool. I know we have one question. Do you have any kind of summing up thoughts before we go to questions?
I think
So.
Hi, thank you very much. That was interesting. I have a question. I've been hearing that NFTs are kind of the first wave of this whole new development. And it's coming NFTs because it attracts a different audience, because they're the people who are computer savvy enough to figure out how to actually pay for things and store them and that kind of thing. So really I'm looking at what happens next. If NFT is the first wave, are you starting to see what maybe the second wave is or the third wave? And it could be different for all of you. I don't know.
What I'm seeing very briefly with Board at Yacht Club is the membership and then a token. And a lot of projects I'm working on are working towards tokens as well, around NFTs, and then a token and perhaps another token around that one. So beginning to see a whole financial ecosystem develop. That's what I'm seeing. But what are you all seeing, if anything, yet?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the kind of creation of decentralized groups that decide, like DAOs, that kind of decide on decisions for brands or for artists, individuals. That's certainly an evolution of certainly an evolution of like the traditional curatorial system. We're actually currently speaking, it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts on this as well, but we're currently speaking about how we can crowdsource opinion from our community to drive decisions within our business. So, if we have 500 people, collectors in our community who all want to see artist X do an exhibition over artist Y, how is it fair for us to make those decisions? How do we kind of give away curatorial decision-making power to a community? And I think that move from essentially a centralized system to a decentralized system of opinion is probably where I see the next step. Alongside in the art world, I think physical immersive experiences of digital art, I think is going to be really, really big.
That's interesting because yesterday we saw Prospera in Honduras, who are a DAO for a whole community, a sizable community, who have a DAO to run their operations. But what are we seeing coming back down to art? Pauline?
Yeah, I agree. I think like next is how we're going to really start introducing, tokens to communities. At least that's really how we are approaching it. Like the whole idea is for me to create kind of digital revenues. So NFTs is one way for the artists, for the curators, their ecosystem. Tokens will be another, with another kind of commitment from the artists, the curators on the platform. So tokens means decentralization and going to a DAO. So I really do agree with you. And of course, like I think, metaverses gonna be there along the way, accompanying it more in the art side, right? I'm talking about the art, but more like for openings, I think like galleries, museums gonna start opening up, not only the one existing, but like new ones opening up there. And concerning DAO, like I think the community, of course, should. But on the platform, we are saying we are decentralizing curation, because when you have such an amount of professional art curators, you are kind of decentralizing it, because it's not Artpool choosing the artist, right? We have more than 900 curators doing their work, and so for me, it's decentralizing curation. But I also really believe on the profession of the curator. I am a curator and I am not a developer. So it's and I don't think that's as easy. Not everyone can be a curator. So I think like the community and the collectors and everyone involved like definitely have a say to it. At least that's where we are going with the token and the governance. We're gonna keep like the curators deciding the artist on the platform, but at the same time, of course, having votes of the collectors and the community that wants to see certain type of, movement or localities in the world. Like, so, I think like that's how I'm seeing it, but it's very specific to the work we are doing and the art world. Then after like.
Absolutely.
I don't know what's going to be the next thing,
No, but to me, you're kind of perfect for it because you are already highly qualified and you're already highly decentralized because you have that volume to decentralize properly, right? A lot of projects have problems decentralizing because they don't have enough volume or qualification or diversity, but you have that already.
Yeah.
So, you want to watch Artpool, certainly in terms of how you approach your DAO, because from a professional point of view, you're really well qualified for it.
Yeah. And it was like we curated the curators, but when I went into Web3 and I realized like DAOs and I was like, but this is perfect. This is everything I wanted. I don't want to continue choosing curators forever. I want the community to build by itself, and that's the perfect tool to do it.
And yeah, now we know this is the woman who doesn't make a distinction between Web 2 and Web 3 because you kind of were Web 3 anyway.
Yeah,
I would say.
exactly.
Maybe that's why.
Maybe.
So yeah, thank you. Any closing thoughts? We're down to a minute and a half. Or response to the question even.
So I think in response to the question, the thing that I'm most excited to see is this real integration of blockchain into the creative process. So how can blockchain actually impact consumer behavior, for example? So there's an incredible artist who airdropped So Gay for free a series of work to his original collectors with the condition that if it got released back into the market, within a certain time period, let's say of 2 years, the entire market would be flooded by the same work. So that then impacts the way the consumer behaves, and it completely changes your relationship to an owned good. So that kind of thing, the integration of oracles. So what if you had a dress that caught fire when the price of Ethereum dropped?
Right.
Or was altered? How can you make the creative process more rich and change the way you interact with the good in its digitally native form?
Wow, that's like the Banksy that as soon as it was sold, do you remember that?
Exactly.
Was guillotined, and it still retained its value. But yeah, it's great to have more fungibility in the whole piece, definitely. And the metaverse we didn't really touch on, but I think it's absolutely massive, right? That kind of goes without saying. Yeah. Virginie.
Yeah, just to go back to the question, I think NFT is more a way than a waves. I don't see NFT disappearing in the next month and years. In our case, it's the way for us to ensure that you can authenticate your assets, you can enable your user and the artist and designer to trade them and monetize them as well. So even more and more NFT will be used as a technology more than even a membership actually to serve a specific product, to serve a specific service. So for me, it's just the next it's just the continuation of the way we will use it and the way NFT will support any businesses in Web3.
Joe, do you agree? Or
I do agree. Yes, I agree. And yeah, I think just the opportunities that it's providing for artists, I think, is phenomenal. And just in the last year, the amount of new artists we've seen considering themselves as artists, being able to kind of stage exhibitions, be able to make a market for their work and build a career for themselves, I think, is astonishing. And I think the big question now is how does decentralization and curation, how do they get in bed together and how do they coexist peacefully? Because they're kind of, in many ways, kind of diametrically opposed concepts, right?
Right.
So I think that, like, by curating a decentralized group of curators, I think, is a very interesting concept.
Absolutely, and
I think that's the key. How do we find leadership and curation in a decentralized world? I think that's the key to articulating what quality means. It
really is, and we see what happened in Web 2 with that. So I think we've learned a lot of lessons. Anyway, we've got a good template, and thank goodness it's art, which really is kind of one of the ultimate mediators, I would say, really. So we're lucky there. And what I would just sum up by saying what I'm seeing here is what I'm also seeing in gaming. Gaming was play to earn. Axie Infinity this time last year was untouchable, absolutely massive. Sliding down slightly now. FTX has invested $1 billion in gaming licenses. They're talking about social gaming, and people prefer to be gaming than watching TV or going to a movie. I think we see this whole community piece as being very big for art and fashion as well. So, thanks for everything you're doing. Thanks for coming today and your thoughts, and look forward to catching up again maybe next year at CogX and seeing what's going on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.